which was a national tour inviting climate justice activists to come together to learn strategies and build community in solidarity with the Lakota nations at Standing Rock. And part of that training involved learning what it meant to be a good relative to our indigenous siblings, learning what it meant to build community, learning all the nuances of building a direct action effort, and some hands-on, nonviolent direct action trainings. Well, one of these trainings was a soccer game. And so they took us out, it was a lovely spring morning, they took us out onto the asphalt by the Greenpeace warehouse, and they said, we're gonna play a soccer game. And they asked for 5 volunteers to be on a team. And I used to play soccer all the time as a kid, much to my mother's chagrin. I was that goalkeeper that would dive at players' feet. I had braces at the time, so you can imagine the bills there. And I raised my hand. I wanted to be on that team, but I didn't get picked. And then they said, well, now we need 10 people to be on the other team. And I thought, oh, the odds are in my favor there. And I raised my hand, and I was picked. And instantly, I think some of you are seeing what might be happening. Some of the folks on the team of 5 were thinking, hey, wait, this is unfair. It's 5 against 10. There's no way we're going to be able to play this game fairly. And I thought, this is great. I get to play as an oppressor. The rules are in my favor now. And then the rule keepers, the ones running this activity, said, well, actually, the team of 5 gets to set 3 rules that the team of 10 must follow. Instantly I thought, oh, I see, we are the oppressed. We are the large majority of the oppressed going to fight the oppressor. The rules that they set were pretty oppressive. The first was that all of the players on the team of 10 had to play linked up with another player. Linked up with another player. We could only kick the ball with our non-dominant foot. And if we were going to try to score a goal, we had to kick backwards. So you can imagine now the team of 10 had some objections, but the rule keeper said, this is how it's going to go, start playing. Well, immediately we decided as a team of 10 that we weren't going to follow those rules. We started by linking up arms and just standing in front of the goal. The rule keepers widened the goal. Then we decided, okay, you know what? We're just going to pick up the ball and run it to the other goal. Well, the rule keepers kept ejecting our players to the objections of the rule of 5, the game of 5, team of 5. The coffee hasn't quite kicked in this morning. And then we decided, forget it, we're just going to sit on the ball. And at that point, the rule keepers ejected everybody on the team of 10 and said, that's it, we're done. So I was really excited to debrief this activity. We gathered in a circle with all of the folks that had been playing on this team, on these teams, and everybody else that was at this training. And when they asked the players what was it like, I was as energized as I am right now and said, oh my God, this was so good. I could see how the team of 10, we were coming together, coming up with strategies, refusing to play the game according to these rules. You know, we were really fighting against these oppressive rules that the team of 5 was setting. And the team of 5 said, yeah, but you had 10 people. You were outnumbering us. Of course we needed those rules to make it fair. And then somebody that wasn't playing the game, but was watching, raised their hand and asked, why didn't the 2 teams just work together? I deflated like a balloon when I heard that one. Why did the 2 teams choose to follow those rules? Why didn't the 2 teams work together? In that moment, I realized that I hadn't been thinking big enough in this activity. that in all of my self-righteous entitlement, I was still limited in my understanding of what was possible. I was so focused on what I was fighting against and who I was fighting against that I was limiting my imagination of other strategies, of other possibilities. I was so focused on what I was fighting against, I forgot what I was fighting for. See, I hadn't considered that I could be a part of something larger, something united that would have both teams liberated from a set of insane rules that had all of us at a disadvantage in different ways. In that moment, much to my disappointment, I had forgotten my universalism. I had forgotten that universalism that would have had us combining efforts and strategies, visions, imaginations beyond what was in front of us, and possibilities of a world beyond what is. What if we had been grounded rather than in this idea of scrapping to survive, in this idea of just trying to make it through? What if we had been grounded in creativity, hope, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of each other as soccer players on that asphalt field? We could have imagined playing something completely different. We could have played a game of 5-on-5. We could have found some chalk and played Foursquare. We could have just sat down and had some conversations in that warm spring sun. Why didn't the two teams work together? They didn't tell us this afterwards. They didn't tell us this until afterwards. But the title of the activity? Soccer for Suckers. So we know what we are fighting against. These days, it feels like that list of what we are fighting against only gets longer. That to-do list for justice just keeps growing. But that, what we are fighting against list, that cannot be the fuel for our faith, for our imagination or our creativity. We are not only a counter voice to oppression, we must be a voice for liberation. We need those stances and actions against the oppression and violence in this world, don't get me wrong. We need to have those stances, but those stances, those actions, they cannot be the end goal. Answering evil cannot be the end goal of our Unitarian, Universalist faith. So what is? Since starting in my role with your Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of California last year, I have been encouraging Unitarian Universalists like you to answer a question. What do you envision when you imagine a world with love at the center? What do you imagine when you see a world where we no longer have to fight oppression, where the inherent worth and dignity of all is instinctively affirmed, where our interconnected, interdependent existence is rooted in reverence, humility, gratitude, deep, accountable relationship, where there is justice. How many of you have had a chance to actually sit and imagine that world? The quote in today's service description from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King says that peace is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. That quote actually comes from one of his sermons called "When Peace is Obnoxious." And he wrote that sermon in the wake of the dismissal of Autherine Lucy, the first Black woman to attend the University of Alabama. She encountered violence, threats to her life, and there were riots around campus by the campus community because of her admission and attendance. Who can guess what the University of Alabama did next? They dismissed authoring Lucy. They didn't dismiss the folks who were rioting. They didn't show up for her and her rights. They dismissed her. And a local paper wrote, "Things are quiet in Tuscaloosa today. There is peace on the campus of the University of Alabama." Who here thinks that was actually peace? All right, good, you passed that test. Dr. King talks about this cost of alleged peace, or what some of us might call comfort. This cost of this alleged peace came at the price of the humanity of everyone involved in that situation, and in particular, the people whose lives they've had to remain silent throughout their lives when they encounter and experience violence against them simply for asserting their right to be. As Dr. King wrote in that sermon, if peace means a willingness to be exploited economically, dominated politically, humiliated and segregated, I don't want peace. In a passive, nonviolent manner, we must revolt against this peace. Peace is the presence of positive good. See, peace is not merely an absence, but a presence, he reminds us. If the positive good isn't there, then the tension must be there. Frankly, the tension is always there. The tension is there when we know we have these values. We know the reality that human beings have inherent worth and dignity. Our world is an interdependent, interconnected set of relationships, and they are being violated. That is tension. And Dr. King reminds us that those of us who are engaging in actions to bring forth our awareness of this tension, we're not creating it. We are actively working to replace it. To remove this tension, yes, and to replace it with justice. So what is justice? You know the joke, if you ask a Unitarian Universalist or 5 Unitarian Universalists a question, you're going to get 17 answers. You could say the same thing about that question, what is justice? There is no neat definition. You know, there is no, as Reverend Sean shared, there is no one right way, no one right strategy. We need multiple efforts, multiple visions to come together. But I have a story that I think might help us start to see what justice could look like. In July 2018, Unitarian Universalists and people around the country came to San Diego to fight the implementation of Operation Streamline, which would have dozens of immigrants being held in court and processed at the same time in a single hearing, streamlining them through the process and denying them their basic rights. We had a Free Our Future action in which thousands of people showed up in San Diego and engaged in nonviolent direct action, disrupting court hearings, climbing buildings, blocking doors. And we also had song, art, dance. We had children being celebrated, wearing butterflies. We had community. We had love. We had an understanding that there was a future waiting to be liberated. That, for me, was a glimpse of what justice could be.
Peace is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. King says this, but I tell you, tension, being uncomfortable, is no fun, right? Many of us were taught not to be in conflict, right? Play nice, be nice, walk away from it, nobody argues, be peacemakers. We don't necessarily know how to deal with it when the conflict comes up, that anxiety, even that anger. I told you last week that my family, one of the no-nos was don't be angry. It's hard for me sometimes to deal with that anger. I've been learning that as an adult. We've all felt that sense of injustice, right? That discomfort. And we might even find it even among ourselves because we are actually not like-minded people. We have different theologies. Even some of us have different politics. There's all sorts of things. And when something comes up, you're like, ooh, that anxiety. I don't want to lose a friend. I don't want to lose a family member over a disagreement. So what do? Well, there's lots of things that we might do. Inappropriate ways to deal with it. The first method is like in our story. We ignore it. I didn't hear that. No, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I don't want to listen to the radio. I don't want to watch the news. I'm just going to ignore it. We might run away. And one of the things that we often do is we're just silent, which is actually saying something, right? The second thing that we might do, like in our story, we might soothe ourselves. This is one that is my personal favorite one. We pile on the blankets and pillows. I binge watch Netflix. I don't know how many times I've watched The Office over and over again. Whatever it is, that discomfort. I don't want to feel that way. But the fork's still there. The tension's still there. It's not going away. And the sooner that we face it, the better. Now, the third thing that we sometimes do is we scorn it. Cynicism. I think of cynicism actually as one of the great, if you excuse the word, sins of this century. This idea that we cannot make a difference, it doesn't matter. That apathy that goes with cynicism. That nothing matters. And in fact, King's speech on the obnoxious peace ends on this. He says, just don't get cynical. Because cynicism flies in the face of history and all that has been accomplished. So all of this is what King called an obnoxious peace. Peace is not the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. And that tension, that discomfort, it tells us to pay attention. We have something to learn, something we need to hear. And growth really only comes through that discomfort. I saw this quote, growth begins at the end of your comfort zone. I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, but I remember loving it. Growth begins at the end of your comfort zone. I know that, for example, a lot of people here are starting to work with Stand Up for Kids and working with homeless youth. And it's uncomfortable. How do we do this? How do we make these dinners for them? How do we organize this? What's going to happen when I get there? How do I interact with homeless youth? It's sort of uncomfortable. We don't know. But then you go and you do it, and you realize, I can do this. And that's stretching our comfort zones. Because discomfort, tension, it's natural. Think about that. It's natural. Because we're being asked to change how we see and interact in the world. So here's some things also that we can do when we do feel tension or discomfort around justice issues or any type of discomfort. So the first is just stop, take a deep breath, and ask questions. We're really good at questions as Unitarian Universalists. Ask questions. Ooh, what's that I'm feeling? Ooh, I'm feeling a little anxious here. Okay. What's going on? Why am I uncomfortable? Be curious. I wonder why they said what they said. What's their point of view? I often go for walks when I'm feeling like I've got to deal with something. Talk to a friend. I have a spiritual director I talk to as well. The second thing is don't face this alone. You've got a whole group of people, wonderful people here. There's a Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry is here. Whatever is uncomfortable, find those people to talk to. I remember one time here at this church, I had to say something really difficult to someone who was attending the church. And I can't tell you the details, but I will tell you that the Committee on Ministry and the president knew about this. It was a really difficult justice thing that I had to do. And my whole body was like revolting against this idea that I had to go say these really difficult things to this person. And I just remember thinking, my Committee on Ministry, Catherine Martin and Tom Lockery were going to be there that night. Like, I'm going to have them there with me. And they were there as a presence with support, and I felt that. It made it so much nicer. When you've got to deal with it, go with people, be with people. Your people here and elsewhere. You don't have to do this alone. I love that here last, was it 2 years ago when we had our midterm elections, people joined organizations like WAVE and Better Angels and Indivisible to make things happen. We did that wonderful forum. And the third thing is be compassionate. Be compassionate to yourself as well as to others. Let mistakes be okay. You can apologize. And remember that compassion is not a competition. You can have compassion for yourself as well as for others. Now, discomfort and tension is normal, and each of us have a tolerance level for it, and you have to decide where your tolerance level is. But I want to remind you of that wonderful question that Reverend Ranwa asked us. What do you envision when you imagine a world with love at the center? What do you envision when you imagine a world with love at the center? Here's another question for you. How uncomfortable are you willing to be in order to make another world possible? How uncomfortable are you willing to be in order to make another world possible? Let me ask you this. How many people here in the last midterm elections participated in canvassing, holding forums, voter registration, all that sort of thing? How many of you voted? Let's put it that way. All right, excellent. There you go. For those of you who were canvassing, who were out there doing various things, was it uncomfortable talking to strangers?
No.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Going door to door. But if Pat McCulley, who's 91 years old, was out there in her walker, like, I had no excuse, right? I mean, she's amazing. All right, how many people plan to participate in the upcoming election? Getting involved, canvassing, holding forums, voter registration. Excellent. Well done. We'll see you there. Because that's part of it. What are you willing to do to help create that other world? We have a lot of support here as Unitarian Universalists to expand our comfort zones around justice, and Reverend Ranwa and the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of California is part of that support. As we move forward this year in elections, there's also something called UU the Vote. And you can see you can even sign up here right now if you want to pull out your cell phone. Our fifth principle, right, is to affirm and promote the right of conscience in the democratic process in our congregations and at large. And this is our way of doing that. It's helping people fight voter suppression. It's helping people register to vote. There's all sorts of different activities. I love they had a list of activities, and it was everything from advocacy and lobbying to put a playlist together to help you survive the election season. And I was like, yeah. That's got a bunch of songs. We heard some of them today that will help us get through the election season. So this is why I'm a Unitarian Universalist. It's not because, it's easy. It's not because, I can just believe whatever I want. It's because it asks me to be a little uncomfortable at times. It asks me to go out there and live my values, the principles that we all share. And this tradition with Ranwa reminds us that we are not just fighters for justice, we're also bringers of liberation. That is worth fighting for. we're asked to liberate ourselves and others and to lead with love. Let us sing together.
Please rise and bow your spirit.